Everyone. So in the previous chapter, we introduced the concept of externalities, and we considered externalities in multiple cases. We talked about positive externalities when we considered things like education, and then we talked about negative externalities when we consider things like pollution. Now, just a reminder, in this case, externalities, right, are unintended consequences or costs and benefits incurred by an economic activity that otherwise is beyond. So, right, education is about developing human capital, giving people the skill sets to go out in the work market and succeed. Well, not necessarily a part of that is things like athletics and sports. However, public athletics and sports is a huge external benefit of education. Today, we're going to get into different kinds of resources and how externalities factor into what we call public goods and common resources. At the core chapter is a discussion of the different kinds of goods, and basically goods are defined by a few characteristics. The first is excludability. Excludability means the property of a good whereby a person can be prevented from using it. For example, if you're not allowed to use something unless you pay how much it costs in order. So that's an idea of excludability. Similar, we'll talk about this in a little bit. A subscription to Netflix is excludable. You can't watch Netflix unless you are subscribing to Netflix. Or let's be honest, someone you know is subscribing to Netflix. Rivalry and consumption. This is the property of a good whereby one person. This is another aspect of how we define goods, and basically what this means is that if you're using a good, does that diminish the ability to? So if you buy a pair of jeans at Walmart, this is excludable on the grounds that you have to pay how much the jeans are in order to own them. And rivalry and consumption means that if you are wearing those jeans, it's really difficult for someone else to wear those jeans as well. Or to use another thing, food is a rivalry and consumption. If you eat something, then eat the same food you do. Now, if we take these categories into account, what we'll find is there's different types of goods. Private goods, which are both excludable and rival in consumption, these are the typical items. These are things like your groceries and your meals and clothing and any host of items. Then you also have public goods. These are neither excludable nor rival in consumption. A tornado siren in a small town, for example, is a case in which it doesn't matter if you pay taxes, you will hear the siren if it goes off. So that is a good for the public. Interstates are another example. It doesn't matter if you pay taxes on interstates. If you access them, you're able to use it, nor does your use of the interstate affect anyone else's ability to use it. This leads us to common resources. These are goods that are rival in consumption, but not excludable. These are things like fishing and hunting. Something we call the tragedy of the commons, which we will get into greater detail in a little bit. But fishing and hunting, for example, are two examples of something. If you go out and you hunt, you're free to hunt on public lands. However, when you do go, if you kill a deer, for example, then that deer is for someone else to hunt. And then we also have club goods, and these are goods that are excludable but not rival in consumption. Country clubs are a classic example of this. You have to pay the membership dues in order to use the country. However, the country club does not diminish the ability of someone else club, so it's not rival in consumption. Volunteer firefighter departments are another example. Now, we can also plot this onto a really useful figure. So this figure 1, it has the 4 types of goods, and it provides us 2 little axes. So we have rival and consumption at the top and excludable to the side. If something is both excludable and rival in consumption, it's a private good. If something is not excludable and rival in consumption, it's a common resource. If something is excludable and not rival in consumption, it is a club good. And if something is excludable or not excludable and not rival in consumption, it is a public good. Take a moment to pause, familiarize yourself with this table. It's a great figure and it's a great reference for an early, easy study. Now, with that, let's get into actually digging into types of goods. A public good, for example, has a certain economic problem associated with it. This is known as the free rider. The free rider problem is the result of a person who receives the benefit of a good but avoids paying. You might know this from school if you've ever done a group project. A lot of people working on the group project, and then one person that seems intent to not contribute as much until the last day. Interstates. It doesn't matter if you pay taxes or not. The interstates have to be funded. City parks, public education, these are all similar aspects where a member of the public, you get the benefit and access. There's also some very important national defense, for example, basic research, and private property. However, there's a difficult job involved with public goods, and this is cost-benefit analysis. And cost-benefit analysis is a study that compares the cost and benefits to society of providing a public good. Point in case, how much is a life worth? For example, if we have a policy that could save people's lives, it's absurdly expensive and it detracts from our ability to help people in other ways, cost-benefit analysis is one of the core questions that makes this useful for policy analysis, though it leads uneasy, questionable moral question. One thing I do want to know is just because something is a public good does not necessarily mean that it is explicitly provided by the government. These are just simply differences. Public goods can be things not provided by. All they are defined by is their excludability, non-rivalry, and consumption. The next good is common resources, and common resources also have a little bit of trade. The tragedy of commons is a classic example used to explain the problem we face with common resources. And the tragedy of the commons is a parable that illustrates why common resources are used more than is desirable from the standpoint of society as a whole. And the classic illustration is that imagine a community that has a central common grazing area for their cows. That's an old analogy for farmers. If all the farmers let their cows graze in the middle because they are free to, because it's a common resource, then their cows have the ability to eat as much as they like. The problem is, if the cows eat as much as they like and people find an incentive to encourage, the problem is this consistently starts diminishing the common area. This starts to diminish the amount of grass in the common area. And as the grass is eaten and eaten and eaten, and owners can push their cows to consume more because no one wants to be the person that has a lean cow, ultimately is that there is no more grass left, and now there's more real examples of this. There's an excellent case, particularly there's a great video by Marginal Revolution University that I highly recommend, and it illustrates how fishing for tuna such tragedy of the commons, where overfishing dramatically reduced the population of tuna fish. However, there's certain policies we use to get around them. And we talked about some of these policies in the last chapter. We can use fishing permits, much like pollution permits. Now, beyond that, though, just some important common resources. Clean air and water are common resources. If you drink water, right, that is not usable by someone else. However, it is useful to the public overall. Congested roads. This is one of the arguments for toll roads, is that if you have too much congestion, it makes it too expensive. It makes it too difficult to use something, and perhaps if you put toll roads in place, this is a way to use the common resources the most, so that this reduces traffic. Finally, fish, whales, and others. Again, just common examples of common resources. If you eat or well, Japan hunts whales, but whale hunting zoo. And other wildlife, any consumption of wildlife basically leads to a diminishing of the ability of anyone else to use these resources. This is a quick chapter, but there's an important conclusion here. Property rights contribute significantly to efficiently managing, using, and preserving resources. And if you didn't notice this, property rights is at the core of each one of these types of goods. If you own it, can you exclude people from it? And does it rival in consumption? These are all questions. overall, this is a quick chapter. I hope you enjoyed. It's an interesting concept, and it's really worth meditating on. And I highly recommend, again, referencing in the document from Marginal Revolution University. It's a great resource. And as always, take care. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know or leave a question in the comments. Take care, all. Have a